Good afternoon, and welcome to the Chamber of Commerce, Southern New Jersey's virtual State Affairs Committee meeting. My name is Christina Renna. I'm President and CEO of the Chamber, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you who have joined us this afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. I'm extremely grateful to today's guest, our good friend, Assemblyman John Burzichelli, for taking time out of his schedule to chat with me and take questions from members amid the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. We'll be hearing from the Assemblyman in a few minutes, but I did want to thank him in advance for being with us. Before we begin, please allow me to thank the sponsors of the Chamber's Government Action Series, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. Additionally, I would like to thank the sponsors of our State Affairs Committee, Atlantic City Electric, Comcast, LAN Associates, MWWPR, New Jersey American Water, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group, Paulsboro Refining Company, PSEG Nuclear, LLC, Samaritan Healthcare and Hospice, South Jersey Gas, Thomas Edison State University, and United Airlines. Thank you to all of you for your generous support of the Chamber's programming as we continue to navigate the COVID crisis organizationally for the betterment of our members and the entire regional business community. A few housekeeping items before we begin. In a moment, I'm going to formally introduce the Assemblyman and then turn the floor over to him to give some opening remarks. Once he concludes, I will pose several questions that we received from members in advance, but also keep in mind that at the bottom of your screen, the chat function will be open. So as the Assemblyman talks or as the Assemblyman and I engage in Q&A, if any questions come to mind that you'd like to ask him, simply type it in the chat. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. But again, no promises. We try to get to as many as we can. If not, we will certainly follow up with you after and get you an answer to your question once the virtual event concludes. Or if a question comes to mind after we conclude, you can always write a follow-up question in the survey you'll be emailed after the event. As all of you know, a lot of our virtual programming is just like our in-person programming, and we do always survey our attendees and participants to make sure you are happy with the programming, hear your suggestions, and again, take any questions that you might have thought of after the event concluded as well. So with those items out of the way, allow me to formally introduce today's guest, Assemblyman John Burzichelli. Since January of 2002, the Assemblyman has served the 3rd Legislative District, which includes 3 towns in Cumberland County, most of Gloucester County, and all of Salem County. The Assemblyman is currently Deputy Assembly Speaker, Chair of the Assembly Appropriations Committee, Vice Chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, and is also a member of the Joint Budget Oversight Committee. As many of us know, Assemblyman Burzichelli followed in his father's footsteps, who was also a devoted public servant. His father, John D. Burzichelli, served as mayor of Paulsboro for 16 years, as did the Assemblyman from 1996 through 2011. Just last week, Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin named Assemblyman Burzichelli, among others, to a new advisory panel to assist him and other members of Assembly leadership on efforts to ensure New Jersey can safely reopen after the devastating impacts of COVID-19 subside. We look forward to hearing from him on his appointment to this task force, hopefully learning a little bit more about what the Assembly plans to do and how his district is handling the crisis, which is really starting to see a greater number of cases than ever before. So with that, I'm going to turn the virtual floor over to the Assemblyman. Assemblyman, the floor is yours.
Christina, thank you. Thank you to the Chamber for putting this together. I always look forward to this. It seems I get to visit with the group for this usually once a year at breakfast when I'm not quite awake. A little more awake at the moment, but I apologize for my informal appearance, but not a lot of call for suit and ties at the moment. Coming to you from the 2nd floor where our offices are at Hill Studio in Paulsboro. We've been shut down since March, small business, feeling the effects of this directly. Not sure when we're getting back. We serve the advertising industry. Not sure how advertisers are going to be responding when things open up. Christina mentioned a couple of points. I'd just like to go into just a few details before we get into questions, which is really where I prefer to get to rather than be making speeches. She mentioned that we have a committee established at the Assembly level to try and add to the discussion of how we bring the economy back. Pleased to be serving on that. It's a pretty large committee. George Offinger has agreed to jump in. He's a really smart guy. He's going to be very, very helpful. The Senate has a similar committee, a little smaller in size, that the Senate President has put together. And the Governor's assembled a committee which looking at it, I mean, if you were going to have a committee made up of academia and high-ranking leaders of big businesses, it's probably a pretty good committee. But I don't see any restaurateurs. I don't see any small business people. I don't see any farmers. I don't see any car dealers. I don't see any chamber representatives, any business and industry representatives. And we were going to be speaking to the governor about that, about how that committee functions. But we got to be careful not to have too many committees. I mean, getting reopened is going to be complicated only in the fact of where is there going to be consumer confidence? How will people feel comfortable coming back out? And I'll say to all of you, I mean, I'm getting the same information all of you are getting in large part. Of course, you got to read between the lines. I'm not drinking Clorox bleach. I'm not inhaling Lysol, but I am continuing to make sure that the Kettle One distributors are able to feed their families to the best of my ability. But you know, I think our breakthrough will come when maybe one of these existing pharmaceuticals is proven to be effective for treatment. Because if people know they can get treated, and now that the hospital situation is stabilized and personal protective equipment is in flow and doing better, although I tell you frankly, interestingly, there's a shortage of hospital gowns at the moment. Masks have caught up, face shields have caught up, suddenly gowns are in short supply. The ventilators seem to be okay. But as soon as maybe if we can get lucky and one of these off-brand use of existing pharmaceuticals can be proven to be somewhat effective, that's going to go a long way for people to think, look, if I do tangle with this, I'm probably going to be okay. Even though the majority of people that seem to get it don't get affected by it in any kind of harsh way, from what we can see. This Rutgers test is exciting as far as the antibodies go, as being effective. And that's exciting for the state university. It's been discussed nationally, probably worldwide. So, you know, Rutgers University, that's important research work. I mean, that's a big breakthrough. And that test, it looks like it holds great promise. And for Rutgers, not so good at football, but it looks like they're pretty good at the antibody test stuff. And that's what we really need right now. So just looking down, I mean, the legislature has been in session in an interesting way. We've done it electronically, first legislature in the country to do that. But it's been very narrow in its use because, you know, not having public participation, not having committee hearings is concerning to many of us as the process works. But we're now going to have a few committees by way of electronic, similar to what we're doing now. So committees are going to start to meet again in a very structured way, not that they're unstructured, but really very focused. And all the bills we have done have been bipartisan bills dealing directly with the virus stuff, whether it be enhanced unemployment. We did an interesting bill as far as liability involving medical facilities and medical personnel in treating the virus. That drew a little bit of controversy, but it seemed to be the right thing to do. And we have many New Jerseyans that are on unemployment. I mean, last week the number had exceeded 800,000. Think about that. It's almost 10% of the population of the state. We're using computers that are 40 years or older. We've long been concerned about that technical infrastructure breaking down, but they're holding it together with a wing and a prayer and however else they're doing it. But you have many people applying for unemployment that have yet to get a check. It's going to be enhanced with the federal side. We're grateful to them, but a lot of money hasn't flowed yet, but it's coming. But you have families that are sort of stranded at the moment. So you see these long lines for food banks, and it's heart-wrenching to watch this. But that money will flow. The EDA opened up some programs, and that was oversubscribed immediately. I had a friend, small business that called looking for help from the EDA. They met the qualifications. They were in there early before they had to shut down when they got overrun. So they called the office and they asked, can you find out where we are on the list? We can't get a call back. So they were going to service 500 applications, which they're doing in some form. And her number was 25,000, like 840 or something. So she's not going to make it. And we don't have more money at the moment to give to the EDA that's readily available. We have spent a lot of money on our state's response in buying supplies and underpinning operations. It brings us to the budget discussion. You know, our budget, normally we adopt a new budget July 1st. It's been pushed back since September. First time it's ever happened. You know, a lot of uncertainty of what revenues look like. We were doing so well, had such grand plans based on the governor's presentation. All that now has to be set aside. That all has to be revisited. School funding is not going to be the numbers that were discussed. All that stuff, it just isn't there. So the governor is negotiating with the feds in a loan package. He wants to borrow like $9 billion. That's a big number. And, you know, I'm not even so certain that he needs legislative approval to do it, although now it appears maybe he does. We hope he does, because many of us think that maybe that's not the right number. You know, we need to borrow really just what we need. We don't want to borrow too much because eventually it's got to get paid back. There's no indication it's all going to be forgiven. So I think what will happen when we come out of this, It's going to be new efficiencies needed. This path to progress you've heard the Senate President talk about is going to have to be really taken seriously, and we're going to be much different when we come out of this collectively as a society. Hopefully better, by the way. I mean, I haven't spent this much time at home since I was a sophomore in high school. That's pretty different, by the way. So that being said, I generally think the governor's done pretty good through this. He comes across as caring because he does care. He's compassionate. Remember, he had just come out of surgery and had to jump right into this. So I applaud his effort. And today you probably heard that he announced that parks are going to be reopened, golf courses are going to be reopened. A number of we're lobbying very hard over these last couple of days for that to happen, because when they initially we're going to put the states together to talk about a phased opening. Pennsylvania and Delaware weren't included. We brought to his attention, reminded him that there is a western border and there is a southern border. So we're very pleased, the South Jersey delegation, that Delaware is in the mix and Pennsylvania is in the mix, because that means as we talk about this, we don't get run over by the influence of the New York City market, which affects our northern counties, because they're different numbers, their circumstances are different, and their phased opening will likely be different. At least you would think so. Of course, we have the issue of Atlantic City. I mean, how do you open casinos and then have them draw from New York City, where you may not want to have that flow right away? But again, if the pharmaceutical side can catch up with this, a lot of those questions go away. So that being said, happy to answer questions. Not going to have a lot of answers on budget stuff yet. I'd like to talk about it. We're looking for feedback. The 3rd District, myself, Steve Sweeney, Adam Telfair, our offices are open, and we're taking a tremendous amount of incoming calls related to unemployment. The staff's working very hard, and we're staggering the staff, some working from home, some in the office. No real foot traffic in the office, but a lot of people calling, looking for help how to navigate the unemployment process. And it's getting a little better, but it's got to catch up. So that being said, Christina, how do we do questions? How does this work at this point?
Well, thank you so much, Assemblyman, for your comments. Let me start my video here. We have some questions that were submitted in advance, and just want to remind everyone that's tuning in that the chat function is open. I see 1 or 2 that have started to populate in. But we're going to kind of tick through some of the more general questions. Assemblyman first, you touched on a lot of them, but let's get into a little bit more detail where we can, and then we'll get into some of the questions that come through on the chat. So before we begin, and again, thank you for your comments, but I always like to start these conversations by just asking how you are, the family, the residents of Paulsboro that are so near and dear to your heart, but of course your whole district. How's everyone holding up?
Well, Christina, I'm in the same place that everyone who's tuning into this is. I mean, I think people are doing pretty well. I mean, I think people are responding well. People are wearing masks where they're supposed to be wearing masks. I mean, there are some people flaunting the guidance that's been given, because that's just how people are. But all in all, pretty good. Although we buried 2 people 2 days ago between Paulsboro, Gibbstown, which is where I live, one 98 years old, one 91 years old. Both their days were cut shorter because of the weight of the virus that fell upon them. So it's touching everywhere, and it's as real as it can be. I mean, we had a 10-year-old girl in Paulsboro 2 weeks. It was diagnosed with the virus. Now, fortunately, she's come through. But so this is hitting all age ranges. But again, I get back to the point that, you know, the missing piece here, and, you know, this, I don't say this in a partisan way at all, but the feds let us down. You know, the federal government's there to protect its people, as all levels of government are. We got behind the 8 ball on this. You know, history will tell us exactly what happened and why those decisions were made. And you can't look backward, you have to look forward. But I am angry about it, but I can't go back and get that time. So we got a late start. I think the state apparatus has responded pretty well. You know, Governor Cuomo out of New York was helpful in the tone he sent. And I thought Governor Murphy's tone was equally good. Governor of Pennsylvania, you know, Pennsylvania is such a different place because it's so wide. You know, between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, there's a whole different kind of state in between those 2 places. Mm-hmm. But this reminds us, by the way, of how different New Jersey is. You know, finally, the state recognized formally what Central New Jersey is. They never had that definition before. So there's a Central New Jersey, a South Jersey, and a North Jersey, and that's why getting Pennsylvania and Delaware included in the multiple state committee was so important to us, because if not, we would have solved decision making. We would have had to fight back on decision making that was under the influence of what was taking place in New York City and environs, and that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing equally as serious but not as impacted.
Sure. Thank you for that. I mean, I think it's interesting too, you know, I don't know about you in your district office, but, and I want to give kudos to your team, and you have Leanne on your staff, who's one of the best in the business. And I know that your district office has been inundated with all kinds of calls, and you alluded to the majority of them being unemployment. Is that accurate? Is that the most you're hearing from your constituents, is issues with Department of Labor and the unemployment, or are you hearing a greater array of issues? And if so, what are they, if you're willing to share?
Number one, if you were to have a list of 10, number 1 through 9 would blame it. Because remember, the majority of people that are applying for unemployment have never had to do it before. These are people that are regularly employed. These are people that have been furloughed by intention as part of a strategy. They're not used to this. And for these households that were living paycheck to paycheck, which it's a lot of us, I know that feeling. You know, suddenly that paycheck isn't there, and the system that's going to help them, and it is going to help them, is a traffic jam. But the labor commissioner has responded well. I mean, they haven't taken him out in a straitjacket yet. At this point, you think he almost would. It be like, you know, Robert Duvall in the original movie MASH that played the dentist. He left in a straitjacket, you know, singing songs at the end. You know, can you imagine what it's like to be in his position? I mean, then he had to cobble together 500 laptops to go out so they could process. They're doing a good job, but there's just a lot of fear out there among people. They've never been in this position before, and they don't have the wherewithal, you know, to handle this for multiple weeks. So remember, what are we into this? 5 weeks, 4 weeks now? It's all run together. There's days I lose track of what day it is because my schedule's so thrown off. It's so different. So, but that's number one issue. But the governor has assured us, Treasury has assured us that this money will go out, and everyone will get checks related to when they were supposed to, when they originally filed. But it's just a matter of getting it to them.
Sure.
But that's a big issue at the moment, getting money into these households.
One issue we've heard at the chamber quite a bit from businesses, and this was more early on, but we still get this question pretty frequently now, and I'm curious if you've heard it as well, is a little bit of a frustration from South Jersey businesses that the governor has not taken a more regional approach to when he was shutting down the state and now reopening the state. I've had members come to us pretty frequently and say, South Jersey's just starting to kind of hit the peak, especially down your way. Our business could have been open for 3 more weeks before we ever had to shut down. That could have been 3 more weeks I was in business, but I was forced to shut down. We heard a lot of frustration, and now we're hearing frustration as we get closer to Memorial Day weekend and folks wanting to get to the beach, that the governor should reconsider and have a more regional approach and consider South Jersey being unique to other parts of the state. Have you heard that? And if so, and if either way, have you heard that? And I'm curious your personal thoughts on it.
Well, we've been those who represent the southern part of the state with a collective voice have been directly in touch with the governor. Myself, as recently as 2 days ago, asking, you know, with this regional organization of states, out Pennsylvania, particularly Philadelphia, announces the resumption of elective surgery and opening up of golf courses, and we didn't, since we're supposed to be in a cooperative form here. And so today, the governor announced parks are going to open, golf courses are going to open. I think it's Friday. I think it's Saturday. But he did not address the elective surgery side. But I want to tell you that's coming. So we do have his attention that there's going to be different steps in different places. Although the announcement I just mentioned is for statewide. One of the concerns internally that gets discussed constantly is, say, for example, if the casinos were allowed to open, where do they draw from? And so what does that mean? And, you know, for a restaurant who may be sitting in Cherry Hill, they're not going to be drawing from Bergen County. The shore attractions are going to draw from a lot of different places. That's going to be a major question of how that answers, how that opens. And that's why I say the relief is going to come. Like this morning, the news is about this antiviral drug. I forget the name of it. That supposedly have some sudden promise. That's the breakthrough we need, because I think the hospital systems are there now, and there's confidence there. And if the pharmaceutical side can catch up quickly, not necessarily with a vaccine, but a treatment that will give a person a better chance if they're heavily impacted, it's going to make this opening up a lot easier. But bottom line on the regional stuff is we are loud and clear with the governor that the southern part of the state has different circumstances than the northern part of the state. and therefore we should consider reopening in different ways. And we're watching very closely, all of us. I'm sure everybody's on this event we're doing. The move in Georgia, the move in Ohio, the move in Texas, for guidance of what we should do and how this should work. Because the idea of a restaurant opening with limited capacity, that's a good thing. But at the same point, there are business people. This is a Chamber of Commerce event. Everybody knows restaurant business is tough as it is. If you knock their capacity down by 60%, they're not going to be in business long. And so, what's the ripple effect going to be in their negotiations, negotiating lease with the landlord? Because a lot of those leases are set up, with volume participation. They're based on what the business can do and what the value of the business is. That goes back to what the value of the rent lease is. So this is going to be complicated for a while. But as far as driving a regional voice, we're loud and clear. And I believe we have the governor's attention on that. And there's going to have to be some common sense associated with this sooner than later.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And off the top, you had mentioned the task force or the group that Governor Murphy appointed yesterday. And at least I'll tell you the feedback from our chamber members was that I think that Monday, and not all, but the feedback that we did receive, of course, was Monday and Tuesday combined were a bit of frustrating days for folks in the business community. The governor was seemingly promoting what seemed to be on Monday going to be a reopening plan, and then there were very few details on that plan. It ended up being a 6-point plan on Monday that had really reopening the economy being that fourth bullet after, of course, all of the health measures were in place to get to a point where we could reopen. And then yesterday there was the announcement of the task force, which to your point, and that was, you actually read the minds of a lot of our members. I heard from folks that said, there's no small business representation on this. Why isn't a restaurant person on this, or a bar or restaurant owner? The most impacted industries aren't represented. How can they, form educated opinions to help New Jersey? And a lot of these people, another complaint I had, are not even living in New Jersey or from the state. So I know you did touch on this, and I agree with your point that we don't want too many committees. The Assembly has one, the Senate has one, the governor has one, and then there's another one the governor is rolling out as well. But I mean, how do you think all these groups can work together? Can they? Does it make sense to have so many groups? What are your more elaborate thoughts on this?
It's always a tug, in our structure, just like any corporate structure, the person at the top, in this case, the governor, it's always a tug of war to get his attention. And I think what the arbiter here is public safety and public health. I think the Commissioner of Health will play a large role. And frankly, I think she's done a wonderful job. She's very nice pace, very nice demeanor, very, she's worked as a nurse. This is a person who's really grounded. So, when you talk about opening, for example, we're trusting it's okay for people to go to the supermarket because they have to. They're not uncrowded places. I talked to a friend this morning, it was 45 minutes to get into Home Depot. Now, who the hell would wait 45 minutes to get into Home Depot? I don't wait in line for anything. But the point is, we trust those places, the Walmarts, the Lowe's, the Targets, okay for them to be open. We should cut down the capacity. So, and make that part work and maybe wear a mask. So, it's a tug of war for the governor's attention. I really feel in his heart he wants to do what's best. And as I have reminded him and his staff, that in the end, he won't be remembered for how he addressed this when it started. He'll be remembered how he addressed this as we finished, because that's how this works. So right now, people have cabin fever. People want to get back to work, but people want the confidence to go back to work and to go do these things. That's where good information comes from, and that's where you got to cut through all this other nonsense going on. So bottom line is, with all the committees, it's going to be the delicate diplomacy of conversation and getting the governor's attention and making the case. And the key is not to try to do too much too quickly. The key is one step at a time. Like 2 nights ago, the discussion was elective surgery, parks, and golf courses. Now we got 2 out of 3 as of Saturday. We're going to get the third. I would say maybe we get an announcement tomorrow on the third. So how this will work, Christina, it'll be okay. I mean, it'll all work out. The governor's committee are very nice people. I mean, the new president of Rutgers University, how long has he been here? Is he here at all? I mean, he's a very nice person. So I understand, very smart. But that seems like more of an academic, think tank group. You need people that, the restaurant guy to step up and say, look, here's how I can function. And here's what I can do. And here's how I can train my employees and let me take a run at it. And if I violate this stuff, shut me down. Because by the way, that's probably going to go on for a few months until we know there's a pharmaceutical item to address this. So, we're not going to get weighted down in a lot of meetings, I can tell you that. Getting the governor's attention is the key, and there are a number of people that know how to get the governor's attention. And there's a number of people who know who to go to, who know that person can get the governor's attention. So it's going to be a lot of internal work, but his committee, you guys should have had a seat on that. Why wouldn't the South Jersey Chamber of Commerce have a seat? And why? I think it's just an oversight. I wouldn't be surprised if that committee doesn't get restructured, because there's been some questions asked. So, I wouldn't be surprised if that committee doesn't get restructured.
Well, thank you for saying that. And we have certainly made the argument to the front office that we need some very specific South Jersey representation as it relates to the business concerns of this region specifically. And that's not just the shore area, although that is obviously a huge piece of it, the tourism piece, but all of South Jersey, our agriculture, our wineries, the things that make the South Jersey economy truly what they are. So we've made that argument as well. But I appreciate you mentioning that.
And Christina, others are bolstering that argument. I suspect there'll be some movement. Or the other thing is too, nothing prevents your group, because this group has always handled itself well in how it's presented its position. Nothing stopping you at all from getting a strong guidance position paper in place and getting it moved onto his desk, which I'm certain myself and others would be happy to advance.
Mm-hmm. In the works, Assemblyman, in the works. You'll be seeing that hopefully. And by
I'm so surprised to hear that.
In the chat function, we have a lot of questions popping up about specifics as it relates to reopening of X, Y, and Z. So I want to mention too that the Senate President last night, late yesterday, did issue a release announcing a bipartisan group of senators that really wanted to see some of the things you mentioned, right? So the parks, the golf courses, elective surgeries. He also said construction, some construction. He also said, I'm drawing a blank, but there were a few items there listed. In the chat function here, we have a question about the status of opening up construction projects that were deemed non-essential. We have a question here about summer pool clubs where the families go with their, where do you think these things are going to fall in the trickle down of the reopening?
Well, I think jobs will play the big role up front. The pool stuff will come, but if you speak to Janice in my house, she'll tell you that remodeling the bathroom is essential. I'm happy to tell her that it's not at the moment, but I suspect that'll be essential very shortly. I would think you'll see a wider opening of construction jobs soon as well. Again, Pennsylvania just made that announcement. So, and those sites, whether it be large or small, can be safely managed. People understand this. Port and Paulsboro is still being built. The new academic building in Glassboro, we've got 60 people working there today, and they're all managing themselves well. We have no, thankfully, knock on wood, we have no virus cases on either of those sites at the moment, have not. So I think, again, as I say, we've got to tackle these things one at a time. So I think the construction stuff will come sooner, much sooner than later. The pool stuff, that's got to be figured out. Frankly, as far as the pool club goes, that's very contained. You would think that people would be able to maintain a distance that we're safe. And if chlorine water doesn't help this, not that you're supposed to drink it, but if sun and chlorine bathing in a pool and chlorine water doesn't protect you, I don't know what would protect you. So, but we'll get to that one step at a time, I would think. So construction jobs, I would think, would come very soon.
One of the items in the governor's reopening plan had to do with getting more testing sites up and running in New Jersey. And obviously we do have fewer in South Jersey, which makes sense because we have fewer cases in South Jersey. But what are your thoughts on the need to get more testing sites in South Jersey, or specifically your district? Do you think that there is a need? And if so, do you think that that's something that will come to fruition?
Oh, we need it. This is the legacy of the federal government's failure to move in a timely fashion, that this test stuff has lagged so far behind. Think if we had 6 or 8 weeks that we could get back, and we're better advanced on getting the right test out, either taking advantage of what the World Health Organization was suggesting we use, or in this case now ramping up to do the antibody test. Testing answers everything, because I'd love to get a test today. frankly, I mean, I don't know that I didn't have a brush with this, quite frankly. I mean, whether it be mild fatigue, I mean, I didn't have any of the overt symptoms, fevers. I was taking my temperature twice a day. I figured one of two things were going to happen. Either I was going to find, either I either had the virus or I was ovulating. Something was going to happen. So I stopped taking I stopped taking my temperature. But the point is that testing answers everything. And that tells us, who can go to work if you're not feeling well, should you not go, and we can manage this thing. So the widespread testing you hear people talking about is desperately needed. I've now gotten confused as what test we're talking about at this point. Are we talking about the Rutgers test? Are we talking about just strictly that antibody test? Are we talking about, I don't know what test we're talking about, other than apparently it's about the virus. But the bottom line is we need the testing. We need it as widespread as we can possibly have it. Because that'll help us manage ourselves, so we know when not to go to work, when not to go out to the markets, not to go to the restaurant, how to test workers. I mean, hospital workers have complained for weeks that they're working, suddenly only find out that their coworker got sick and has it and never told. I mean, testing answers everything, and that's just as simple as it is. So
and you mentioned Kettle One in your opening remarks, and I like to tell people all the time that I think that vodka is also helpful. I mean, vodka kills everything, right? I
wouldn't say it kills everything.
We're both Kettle One fans, Assemblyman. So
I don't know that it kills everything. In fact, it's probably given a life to a few things. But I do not recommend it for a person under the age of 21. I think I'm supposed to say that. So
absolutely.
So I'm in a test process now to see how effective it is. So the report.
Please report back.
Maybe by the end of the program.
We have a question in the chat, Assemblyman, on a really serious issue that has, been trickling out there a lot in the news, and that's the state's, food insecurity issues. Has there been any conversation in government about how the state can address some of those issues?
We moved money into food banks across the state early on when this unfolded. It's been a really, Speaker Coughlin has taken the food insecurity issues to heart. We moved money into food banks early. I don't know that it's ever enough. I'm hearing stories that they're going to need more help. So more people than ever, you're watching the evening news, you're seeing lines in different states in Texas. I mean, we haven't seen that here, fortunately, but the need is great. And food banks that were serving 100 people are serving 350 people. I know that firsthand by the couple that are operating around me. So, the need is great. We put state money into it. I suspect we'll put more into it as called upon to do so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have a question about meat processors. I'm not sure if you heard about this, but the president did order meat processors to reopen. Do you have any idea what the impact in New Jersey will be, and if there are other food supply concerns? I mean, this gets back to that question that we just talked about, the food insecurity issue. This could help. Anything else that you've heard, or were you familiar with the president's order to open the meat processors?
I follow the president very closely. I'm fascinated by him, I have to tell you that. The press conferences, I can't tell if they're real or they're a rehearsal for Saturday Night Live. The meat processing issue has not touched us at the state government level at this point. So, clearly it affects New Jersey. It'd be a good time to be in the Impossible Burger business, I suspect. But this gets back to your point about why testing. I mean, if testing are readily available, these processing places, these people that have to have people working in close quarters could better manage that workforce, as opposed to wondering, did I wipe this down? Is this person coughing? Is this person wearing a mask? Are we going to have to dress them as if they're working in the emergency room at a hospital? There are issues that those workplaces are they're going to have to make adjustments. I mean, you see, south of us in Delaware, major herds of chickens had to be euthanized, could not make their way into the system. And you had one local councilman down there says, I don't want to test those workers because they're undocumented. That was a bizarre thing to say. So, but if you can test the workers, you can manage the workplace, because eventually you'll get the people that need to go home, and may have a thinner workforce, but be able to piece it together. So just another example where readily available testing in the workplace would be very helpful.
Yeah. So Assemblyman, we're going to switch gears. I always like to start these off really by, of course, focusing on COVID, but we also get plenty of questions about non-COVID related things. And, and that falls into the category of, I think everyone is still kind of questioning, when is it okay to start asking these questions? When is life going to move on beyond COVID? and we get a lot of questions from our members about the budget, which of course, you touched on in your opening remarks. But before we even talk about the budget, let's just talk about the legislature's schedule in general. I mean, if you look at the Assembly and the Senate schedules, busy. They're busy agendas that are out. Well, a lot of committee hearings. Obviously these are going to be done virtually. Are you anticipating these to be primarily COVID hearings, COVID focused legislation, or do you expect other issues to start finding its way back on the docket?
I think you summed it up. Other issues are going to start finding their way as we have a greater comfort level that we can conduct these committee hearings in a way that allows for a seamless way of public participation. So there's a lot of pent-up issues sitting out there that have to be addressed. So yeah, the answer is the other stuff's got to be addressed, we have government has to work. What's going on around us reminds us that there is a place for government, and along those lines, as I said to others, if there's not 21 votes in the Senate at the moment for to make vaccines required, then there'll never be. What's going on around us is what happens when there are no vaccines. So that issue needs to be addressed, and that needs to be addressed sooner than later. So the answer is we got to get back to business. So in fact, when I leave you today, we're going on a test of how we're going to do these committee hearings. I'm supposed to do something. I usually don't know what I'm doing. So people tell me what I'm doing. So 3:15, I have to be somewhere electronically to do something to figure out how we're going to do an appropriations meeting. So that's coming together.
And I think you answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You did say public participation in these hearings. So the Assembly is planning on having committee hearings with people like me who come before your committee all the time, still being able to provide testimony. That's the plan? That's
correct. I'm not sure what form it's going to be in, but we're looking for some kind of live participation, whether we're in this Zoom format or any of the other competing formats. But the idea is to piece something together. So that's, and I guess we're running a test this afternoon at 3:15 or 3:30. So we're trying.
Do you plan to stick to your very hard and fast rule that the Appropriations Committee, we're only allowed to testify on the appropriation of the bill, or are you going to be wavering on that amid all of this new world we're in?
Well, as you know, the Appropriations Committee conducts itself in a very business-like fashion. So we will continue the pace to make sure that the goals of government and its people are achieved. Details to follow.
Good answer, Assemblyman. Can you speak to any, on the non-COVID issues? What are your priorities? What are some of the bills that you would like to see addressed first on the non-COVID front? Do you have anything top of mind that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, I've been an advocate and have been nursing the issue on the outdated, antiquated liquor laws of New Jersey, and that was on my agenda for first quarter of this year. Expanding the ability of restaurants to be able to serve alcoholic beverages. There's been great resistance from the existing license holders. I'm not sure what the mood will be when we really get back into this, because the existing license holders are going to be crying that their world has ended, and the guys who never got the licenses have been struggling in a business where they need that additional flow that being able to sell a drink or a glass of wine would bring them, are going to be screaming as loud. So the overhaul of the liquor license rules is a priority for me. Now, where that will fit, that has to be sorted out with leadership as to. But that was my number one issue in the first quarter for this year, which had to be set on the sideline for the moment.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. I know it's kind of hard to do, but in your opening remarks, you correctly stated, everything that we had done. The governor obviously made his budget address. I know the Senate had its first public hearing, which our chamber testified at. And it's so funny, that feels like it was like 3 years ago. That was actually the last working day that our chamber was in the office was Thursday, March 12th, and that was the day of the Senate public budget hearing. So that's all out the window, and now we're looking at September 30th and a whole new world surrounding it. So I know there's not a lot of answers out there, but what do you anticipate out of this new September 30th deadline, and how is the state going to get to the business of figuring out where we're landing, just budget wise, revenue wise, how do you think we can get enough information together for the road ahead?
Well, we're going to arrive at some conclusion. There's going to be a state budget. Who knows what those numbers will be at this point. We'll be looking to our federal partners to see what they're going to offer to states as far as a recovery program is. They're going to offer something, despite all the bluster that's coming out of Washington about not doing this state, not doing that state. I can't imagine that would really in the end be the case, but we don't know what that's going to be. And the governor, as I may have said at the top of the program, is looking to borrow. There's a number floating around of like $9 billion. It's a big number, but there's also people within his administration are saying that's what the shortfall is going to be with the combination of the drop off of revenue, not the combination because of the drop off of revenue over this will really be a budget and a half. So until we're in possession of numbers, until we see the pace the economy can come back. Because remember, think about it. There's very little money coming out of the casinos at the moment. Fortunately, we have online gaming, but that doesn't replace it. We were at a record pace to overtake Las Vegas on a regular basis on sports betting. That goes away. Automobile sales are down by 60% or more. Number one generator for sales tax. That's not there. And the question is how much is pent up, how much will come back, how quickly will people be willing to spend if they have enough confidence that their job is going to become steady. And so they're all variables, Christina. And like any person, any business person on this program we're running will tell you, and unless you have something that's concrete, it's hard to make a decision. So I don't mean to avoid giving you an answer. I just don't have one. All I can tell you is the state will be in business. There's going to be a budget and life is going to go on in some form. What the numbers will be, we won't know until we get a little bit closer.
So one question I ask, I think I've asked everyone that we've done this platform with that is involved in budget negotiations like yourself, is about tax increases. So with Governor Murphy's initial budget, which again is now null and void for all intents and purposes, I mean, he did propose about $1 billion in tax increases. Now, again, we know that that's done with, and we're going to be looking at a whole new scenario. But still, I mean, do you expect the governor to still push tax increases? And what is your position on tax increases?
I don't, first of all, I don't know what the governor was still pushing for the millionaires tax. That was going to be, I was preparing to be a battle as even under when we were in better conditions. I don't know where we're going to go and ask for more money from people who have had their worlds turned upside down. That's from business to households. I don't know how we do that. The priorities of government are going to have to be reevaluated, and then people are going to have to decide what they're willing to do without from the government side to them. And that includes, we fund so many things because that's what people ask their government to do. How much people are going to be willing to either do on their own or do without, so we can figure out how to balance the revenues. But in the end, the budget reflects what people demand of this government. And so a lot's going to have to do with people, how readily people are willing to adjust their world as well. So, are we no longer going to fund programs for deaf children? Are we going to cut public education back? So the public education is a big part of the budget. So, the governor had promised we were going to spend almost $400 million in new spending in public education. I can tell you that not one school district in New Jersey was notified by the administration to disregard the numbers they were given for the school funding formula, the instruction of their budget. Now, and the comment I got when I raised that question repeatedly was, well, they should know, they can read, they know what's going on. I said, no, what's going on? I said, school superintendents in New Jersey spend money when they're asleep. I said, you have to tell these people that number, don't work on that number. They've never been told that. We're sitting here today, whatever it is today. Today's April 29th. Now, one school district in New Jersey has been told by the state of New Jersey, do not rely on the numbers that you were given as a school funding formula at the time the governor gave his budget. So we're working behind on all that stuff because that money's not going to be there. So bottom line is, how do you ask for more taxes if you've got businesses that aren't functioning and households that have been disrupted? But at that same point, people are going to have to recognize that with diminished revenue will come diminished ability to fund programs that they may find very near and dear to their heart. And how understanding will they be that money's not going to be there? Because too frequently governments become the safety net today look around us. I mean, you know, where I live at, there used to be an Elks Club that was vibrant. There used to be a Moose. There used to be a Lions Club. There was a Kiwanis Club. There was vibrant churches that had structure that would take care of people that were in need. They're not there anymore, in large part. Now it's government. And think of this: we shut the schools down, and still had the responsibility to feed the kids who were at home with their parents. And we did that across the state because that was something we felt was supposed to happen. But just think about that. Kids aren't in school, but the public school system is feeding them. And, you know, we're serving in Paulsboro, serving about 300 meals a day, which actually I thought would be higher than that. So, but that's the expectation people have of government. So if there's going to be less money and people don't want to pay more taxes, there's going to have to be less government spending.
So we're actually, believe it or not, starting to wind down. We've gotten through most of the questions, but speaking of the state's expenses, there was one question that came up in the chat regarding the fact that the state does have, obviously, a long list of expenses. And the question here is, can you tell us what is the status of any income tax refunds from the state's 2019 income taxes?
I'm not aware that there is any delay in processing them. I haven't heard that there are. Now, it could just be that many people have delayed in filing, but if you filed and you haven't gotten, and you live in our district, call us. I'm not aware that money is not being processed. That money, if there's a refund due, that money is going to get paid. So I don't know, Christine, if Treasury's been slow on that, but I'm not aware of any stoppage of that.
Yeah, and I hadn't heard anything either, but I figured since it popped up, I would ask you.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know everything up to date, you know, because there's so much going on around us. So, but I have not been informed of any of that stoppage. So, if you're owed money and you filed and it's seemed like it's been long, you should have gotten it. And you're in my district, call my office and we'll help.
All right. Assemblyman, is there anything you want to say to conclude? I think we got through quite a bit of information, and certainly most of the members' questions today, but is there any concluding remarks you want to wrap up with before I
think I've been pontificating quite a length here. You know, the only thing that I'd like to say to people is it's no time for weakness, and there is optimism to be found in these circumstances. A lot of things are going to change. We have to manage that in a way that's for the betterment of everybody, whatever that change is going to be. But you know, we have to be prayerful that God's hand will surface in the work of good science, and that some very smart people will figure out how this kind of virus can be neutralized, so we can go back to a normal way of interacting with one another. And we have to hope that time is coming very soon. I think there's reason to be optimistic. And above all, you know, just for people to be safe, be smart, and to look out for each other. Because a number of older people get isolated. This is not easy stuff for people. So you have to look out for each other. And you know, government is at work. And for those who don't like government, don't think it's needed, you know, there's a lot of government you don't need. There's a lot of things we don't do well. But public safety is paramount. And I can tell you that the state apparatus has reacted aggressively from the time that we knew we had to act. And I say this loud and clear because I say this as a citizen. I am angry that our federal government did not protect us when we needed them most and got distracted for whatever reason. I don't say that as a partisan comment. The job for them is to protect us. That's what they're there for. That's why they're allowed to print money. That's why we have a standing army to defend the nation. And we lost valuable time here. So although we can't dwell on that, there will be a day of reckoning, whatever that is. History will tell us what happened. Hopefully we learned from it, because this is not the first time there's been a pandemic. It's not the first time this threat has occurred, but it has changed our life. And it's been very costly. A lot of businesses aren't going to make it back. I don't know if my business is going to make it back, Christine, quite frankly. I don't know that we make it. So we'll have to adapt and do something else. Right at the moment, we're busy cleaning the building. So if we have to go to a sheriff's sale, at least you won't be embarrassed. It'll look good. But, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. But everybody, keep the faith, keep a strong prayer going, and let's hope we're closer to the end of this than the beginning, which I think we are.
Yeah. Thank you, Assemblyman. Well, we certainly wish you the best, and thank you for always your candor, your ability to talk to really any issue that we throw at you at the South Jersey Chamber. And of course, we're so happy that you are staying safe. We of course wish you the best of luck, not just with you, your family's health, but also obviously the health of your business moving forward, your personal business. And listen, at the end of the day, the chamber remains a resource for you, for your district office, and for all of your constituents. So if the chamber can ever be of help, you always certainly know where to find us. And so we stand ready to help as well.
Christina, you can be a huge help. The work you're formulating to get to the governor. I think what we're looking for is businesses' voice to assure the governor that they can conduct themselves in a responsible fashion when given the green light to open, that they will have a plan, that they will manage themselves, that they understand the risk, and they understand how to look out for both their employees and the customers coming in. That's the kind of reassurance that the governor needs so he can sleep better at night if he gives the green light to go. I tell you, he really does care. I mean, but you know, as we said to him, we're not going to fix everything all at one time. So this has to happen in steps, but we need to start taking steps. Got to get back to work.
Yep. What I always say to members is responsible steps and reasonable steps are the steps we need to be taking. And so we'll be working with you and of course the Murphy administration as we move forward. So with that, Assemblyman, I do want to thank you again for joining us. I want to thank you to everyone who tuned in. If we didn't happen to get to your question, we'll make sure we do get an answer to you. We will be emailing you out a survey momentarily, so please let us know what you thought of today's events. And if you thought of a question after the fact you want us to get to the Assemblyman, we're happy to do so. So feel free to put it right there on the survey and we'll get that over to him. Assemblyman, again, thank you so much. All our members that tuned in, thank you. I look forward to seeing you online soon.